Welcome to the Co-Authoring Chronicles podcast, 2 voices, 1 tale.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast. I'm Helen Corvis, and I'm here with my co-author, Steaphan. Today, we are going to do another episode on, what would you call it again? Gut-wrenching? Are we still doing gut-wrenching work, Steaphan?
Yeah, meaningful passages and scenes from stories we've read. Maybe meaningful is a better way.
I
What do
like
you
that.
think? Yeah?
I like that. We did an episode like this previously, and I think it was a really nice way to revisit and maybe be a little more thoughtful about why some of the writing that we have read has stuck with us or has caught our attention in some way. And for me, it's a good exercise, and it's kind of like a nice authorly way to kind of revisit some of the work that I've really enjoyed.
It reminds me that, I need to expand my reading more. Helen, you always help me do that because I realize my reading world is closed sometimes, so you've definitely helped me expand that.
So I think you do the same, Stefan, because I did know we choose from different reading pools. But the other day, I was somebody was saying on Reddit that Warren Buffett spends what was it like a certain amount of time every day reading a book, and I thought to
Is that
myself,
fiction? Fiction books?
no, it's a pretty
Oh,
general statement. I have no idea what kind of
oh,
book.
okay.
Yeah, but I think the idea was that if you want to get somewhere, you've got to be consistent. And I thought, you know, how hard is it to spend just like maybe even 20 minutes a day reading a book?
Mm,
Because I don't, you know?
no.
So an interesting thought for any of us, I guess, trying to grow.
It's interesting you say that 'cause I was just noticing my Amazon reading trends, because not to push Amazon, but I do read, primarily ebooks versus printed. And so on my reader, I use the same reader, and then I have like a 2-year approximately streak of not missing a day reading,
Oh,
which I
how
didn't
can you
realize.
say that then? You read plenty. I
Yes,
think
I just don't I read within
within a
yeah,
genre, so to
yeah,
speak.
yep,
Okay. Well, at least you're an expert in that genre then.
yeah.
All right. Well, let's kick it off. So, I tend to pick. So I have a bookshelf that of curated work that I actually choose from, and these are all books to me that I've found meaningful or, to be honest, more enjoyable actually than anything else because I read for pleasure. And so I'll tend to range from an odd selection of classics and even from young adult to whatever. That's kind of what I brought with me today. So I'd like to start with a classic, and it is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Now, I remember reading this as part of a high school literature class. And at first, I really didn't enjoy Jane Eyre. We had to examine it because, to be honest, it's a very well constructed book. There's good use of foreshadowing. There's themes in there where, for example, the author likes to compare the main character, Jane Eyre, to a bird. And you see like reinforced use of that kind of metaphor or simile or what have you. And, ultimately, it is also a gothic romance. So it's well constructed, and I didn't really enjoy it until I got a lot older as a woman, which is when you realize that the feminist undertones of Jane Eyre combined with the romance, make it like a lot more fun to read when you have some experience with life as a lady.
No, and I don't know if it's because you said that as a how did you phrase it? As a woman who's lived something?
Yeah.
Is that why? I don't no, it's really because of my closed world of not reading anything that's within the last decade, but
Mhm.
usually within the last couple of years, written in the last couple of years. So,
Yeah.
it's a flaw in me, but
Well, that's why there's 2 of us. Okay, so I'll provide a tiny bit of backstory. It's about the life of this sort of the life from childhood and of a woman named Jane Eyre, who's practically outcast and friendless by her family. They shipped her off to an orphanage after both of her parents died. And then she grows up in terrible conditions to become I want to say like a nanny. And she accepts a job posting out in remote Thornfield Hall, where the master of the manor is this fearsome, rough, and like very, very passionate Mr. Rochester. And Mr. Rochester, she winds up like growing to admire him a lot. But Mr. Rochester is also like very rich and upper class. And so she knows, or I don't know if she ever thinks that nothing will come of it. But it seems that he's going to, so she's taking care of he also has an orphan that she's nannying. And it seems very likely that Mr. Rochester is about to get engaged and be married to another woman. And so she's planning to leave Thornfield Hall because it won't be appropriate for her to stay anymore. So this is the scene, and it's generally the one they make the most of in movies as well. If you get there. So that's the scene I'm going to read. Are we ready? Are you ready, Steaphan?
Yes, lay it on us.
Okay. All right, here we go. So just about a page. Jane, do you hear that nightingale singing in the wood? Listen. In listening, I sobbed convulsively, for I could repress what I endured no longer. I was obliged to yield, and I was shaken from head to foot with acute distress. When I did speak, it was only to express an impetuous wish that I'd never been born or never come to Thornfield. Because you're sorry to leave it? The vehemence of emotion stirred by grief and love within me was claiming mastery and struggling for full sway and asserting a right to predominate, to overcome, to live, rise, and reign at last. Yes, and to speak. I grieve to leave Thornfield. I love Thornfield. I love it because I have lived in it a full and delightful life. Momentarily, at least, I have not been trampled on. I have not been petrified. I have not been buried with inferior minds and excluded from every glimpse of communion with what is bright and energetic and high. I have talked face to face with what I reverence, with what I delight in, with an original, a vigorous and expanded mind. I have known you, Mr. Rochester, and it strikes me with terror and anguish to feel I absolutely must be torn from you forever. I see the necessity of departure, and it is like looking on the necessity of death. Where do you see the necessity? He asked suddenly. Where? You, sir, have placed it before me. In what shape? In the shape of Miss Ingram, a noble and beautiful woman, your bride. My bride? What bride? I have no bride, but you will have. Yes, I will, he set his teeth. Then I must go. You have said it yourself. No, you must stay, I swear it, and the oath shall be kept. I tell you I must go, I retorted, roused to something like passion. Do you think I can stay to become nothing to you? Do you think I am an automaton, a machine without feelings, and can bear to have my morsel of bread snatched from my lips and my drop of living water dashed from my cup? Do you think, because I am poor, obscure, plain, and little, I am soulless and heartless? You think wrong. I have as much soul as you, and full as much heart. And if God had gifted me with some beauty and much wealth, I would have made it as hard for you to leave me as it is now for me to leave you. So that's the passage.
Magnificent. I love it. There's a lot of emotion in there. Oh, but please tell us. Like, I want to hear what you think of it first. But
Oh, no, no, no. You go first.
well, I mean, so I'm a little slow on the draw, but so she's this orphan. She's
Mm-hmm,
living in this house.
mm-hmm.
So are they close in age enough to where if she were rich and beautiful that she could be his bride?
So that's the fun part, which I didn't mention. This story is actually set in kind of the 1800s. So she's younger than him, but that's totally age appropriate for her to become his bride.
Okay.
So yes, she could be.
Wow. So we have the haves and have nots going on. What's real
Mhm.
love? love conquers all kind of themes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Yes, yes, it is. So well spotted. Yeah, that's a lot of what's in this book, and again, like the part I think that also captures a lot of people about this scene is kind of that statement. She was like, if I wasn't poor, if I'd been born with some beauty, I would make you, I would make you wish to not leave me as well, as much as I don't want to leave you. And it's just, you know, but she still
yeah.
says it, right? It's nice. Anywho. So that's it. That's my passage. I can't believe I ever thought this book was boring.
Mm. I I hear a lot about it, from authors talking about great stories, but, yeah, still haven't broke down. Though, with my title, I kinda did break all my well, I have a hobby of reading really old stuff,
Mhm,
um, but it's usually not cover to cover. Here is what I'm gonna talk about is a story. It's meaningful to me and it borderline's moving on a couple fronts to me. So
mhm,
the story is Conversations on the Plurality of Worlds. It was written by a French author, Fontenelle, and it was translated to English. It was written in 1686. It was translated by Afra Ben, who was one of the first English women or women authors to actually make a living doing authoring. She was a poet. She did screenplays and translations. And so that's the sidebar is she did this great translation work of a great story.
yay. I mean,
Ye
good job. Good job to all authors. Okay, go on.
and the second thing is the author, Fontenelle himself, did something that is really fascinating to me, and I don't know if it's the first or, one of the early, but it was really a sci-fi novel in 1686 about considering other worlds and life on other planets. And it was fascinating to me, this story. It's like a short story, if you will, because it the author takes a lot of what Copernicus was talking about and theorizes a lot of things. And so this whole short story is this like a 4 or 5 day conversation between this woman. I think she's his neighbor, and this is 4 or 5 day conversation where they go back and forth talking about life on other planets. The woman ponders some things, and they meet again, and they continue their conversation. And so that's where I want to read where it really struck me how sci-fi was a thing even back then. And always has to be people bold enough to do something that hasn't been done before. The story is Plurality of Worlds, but it was compiled and has commentary in this select novels and histories, which is a few different short stories. And the interesting thing is that basically this story was almost borderline heresy, and the commentary is almost as such. Like, how can you be talking about other worlds and all this? And it's really just fascinating. So here we go. This is like I think the fourth day of their conversation. Seriously, said I, madam, 'twould be a great pleasure and satisfaction to see several different worlds, and I am often glad to make these journeys in imagination. What joy then it would be to do it in reality. That would be far better than to travel from hence to Japan, crawling, as it were, with difficulty from the point of this globe to another, and still to see nothing but men and women over and over again. Well, said she, what hinders? But we should make a journey through the planets as well as we can. Let us by imagination place ourselves in several positions and situations fit for considering the universe. Have we no more to see in the moon? So that's the passage because they do spend quite a bit of time talking about the people that live on the moon. and and what life is like with them, and the oceans on the moon, and the air, and are they humanoids, or they're speculating that they might not look like humans at all on the moon. The man in the story, I'm sorry I didn't get their names. That's really horrible of me. Um, but the man in the conversation where they're going back and forth is the one kind of taking Copernicus's science. But he talks about the orbits of the Earth, Jupiter and Venus and Mars, just cutting edge, if you will, or future thinking about things that haven't even been settled in science yet. So I just thought that was very interesting and meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah, you had me when he's talked about traversing the globe, but then you lost me when he was like, all these mere men and women and people, ugh. And I'm like, dude.
Please just say no. I don't want to see all these the same humans over and over again.
I know. And maybe that's part of what drives, right, exploration.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes a bit of that need to escape. This is very cool, actually. I think cool, educational, and good to know. Um, but it's also a reminder, right? Like, if you don't write it, maybe other people can't read it.
Yep.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. So my second selection is actually a young adult book. And if you've had the chance to read this series, it is the Dark is Rising series by Susan Cooper. There was a recent movie adaptation that was not very good, I'm afraid, so I can't recommend it. But Susan Cooper actually is a Newbery Honor, book winner, Newbery Medal winner for fantasy. And basically, the story that The Dark is Rising is it's like set in England, but other parts of the world. And there are, of course, a group of the old ones, and there's the dark riders versus the old ones, and they're basically it's one of those two sides of dark and light who are trying to save humanity. And and this is the last book. There are actually 5 books in the series, and this is the last book where it's kind of a culmination of all of the smaller skirmishes that they've been through, and now we're in the final battle, so to speak. So in this scene, basically the heroes of the story are all gathered together, and a lot of the book takes place with like gathering the signs, what they call the signs of the light. And the signs of the light are like these round, small, almost amulets in the shape of a circle that's been bisected with a cross or quarter sected. I don't know. So at the end of this, ultimately, what they need to do, and the book is called Silver on the Tree, because at the end, it all comes down to which side is actually going to get what is prophesied as the silver on the tree, which is basically going to be this kind of set of silvery blooms, these flowers that grow on this very special tree, like somewhere out of time near the end of the world. Very, very epic stuff, right? So here's the conclusion at the end of all of 5 books, and I guess it's more meaningful to me because it's like the massive conclusion of this young adult series. And if you haven't read it, this was like one of the joys of my childhood, right? So again,
Mhm.
Susan Cooper, The Dark is Rising. And here we go. So let's see. So all of the good guys, so to speak, they're all by the tree. Okay. Will shouted to Simon and Barney and Jane, 6 signs shall burn. Take one each and circle the tree. They were at his side, eager, reaching, and in the gold linked chain, each sign in turn came away easily from the rest as the gold seemed to melt and vanish like wax. Simon took the smooth black sign of iron and rushed with it to the tree to stand against the gnarled, enormous trunk, holding it high in challenge. Jane followed with the gleaming sign of bronze, Barney with the Rowan-born sign of wood. There they stood, brave and quivering, staring terrified at the monstrous riders galloping headlong down from the high clouds, down to consume them. Swiftly, Merriman joined them, the brilliant gold sign of fire, Bran holding the crystal sign of water with the sword, to leave Will swinging round last of all with his back to the tree, holding up in defiance the glittering black flint sign of stone. And the riders were upon them with bright lightning and deep thunder that came from no cloud but out of dark air. Their huge horses reared up screaming, lashing out with wild deadly hooves. Hern's great horned figure rode at the dark lords in attack from above, and the force of all the unseen shades of the circle was holding, barring, wrestling them from below with the lady as its shining focus. But the strain was near to breaking point, and a burst of brilliance, the last flower on the mistletoe, burst into bloom. Bran reached up, his white hair flying, swinging Arias over his head to cut the spray, but with the sign of water in his left hand, he only had one arm for the long crystal blade, and his balance would not hold. He cried out in desperation. The Black Rider's eyes blazed blue as sapphires, and he lunged forth in triumph, straining to break through the strength of the circle and reach the shining blue with his own sword. But suddenly John Rowlands was at Bran's side, pale and grim. He seized the sign of water and thrust it out against the rearing attack, the shimmering crystal circle frail in his big brown hand. And Bran, now free to use both arms, swung the glittering blade of the sword Arias at the green mistletoe within the oak and cut the stars of the bright blossom from the tree. As the spray parted, Merriman turned, tall and triumphant, and caught the blossom before it fell. He swept round, blue cloak billowing, and in a swift, breathtaking movement, flung it up into the sky. And the mistletoe blossom changed in that instant into a white bird, and the bird flew up into the sky and flew away, away through the broken white clouds scudding now across the blue, away into the world. Each of the signs held there in each of 6 hands blazed suddenly with a cold light like fire, too bright for eyes to watch, and with 2 mingling voices crying out in fear and despair, the great rearing figures of the Black Rider and the White Rider of the Dark fell backwards out of time and disappeared, and each of the 6 hands suddenly was empty, as each sign burned with its cold fire into nothing and was gone. So that's it. That's like 5 young adult books culminating in one scene. I don't
Oh,
Steaphan, how did you find it?
well, first the question, when was that written
Oh,
approximately?
so this
Like,
is let's see.
I mean,
It,
it's contemporary, I guess.
it's contemporary. The copyright is from 1977.
First, I thought the language use was very, it did a good job, painting this picture of gloom, win or
Mhm.
die.
Yes.
Like failure's not an option, but all of that, but tying it in with this very dire situation and the descriptive
Mm,
language of the horse screaming. We got to use words as authors that throw people off sometimes. And that was a good, like horses don't scream, but, but the use of that actually, I don't know, it was powerful.
yeah.
I like it. And it's poetically written almost, or I
Yeah.
don't know if the whole novel's written that way or it was just like these action scenes or something.
It's it's no, it's actually it's not all action scenes, but and I don't think I was aware until I read that passage, right? Because when I remember it in my head, as you say, she does a good job of painting a picture. I remember the scene, right? Like that very picture of 6 figures surrounding a tree, against the kind of dark cloud of pouring, horsemen who are menacing them. And, it's funny because I know we've kind of covered before some of the advice, like action scenes need to have short sentences to increase the tension, and that's not true in this scene, right? But it's
Hmm.
all descriptive words, scudding clouds, desperation and all that, and it's pretty effective even with those
Yeah,
long sentences. So,
yeah,
yep,
good.
look, awesome,
And
thank you.
then I was thinking, my second thought was that you like stories with characters named Jane. Um, I'm not-
Oh my god, you're right.
okay. Well, I guess the last story is here that I have, and we'll close this episode. I chose something from C.L. Clarke, The
Ooh,
Unbroken, Book One, Magic of the Lost. The story is about a lieutenant in a conscripted army. Her name is Touraine, and she is really trying to make it up the ranks in the conscripted army. And the novel starts out with her coming off a ship where they have a detail to protect a princess of their a kingdom, which under which she's conscripted. And so she's there with her soldiers. The princess gets off the ship, and then there's an attack by these people, coordinated attack to either abduct or harm the princess. And Terrain's the one that alerts the princess's guards and everything that something's going down. She is the main reason the attack on the princess is thwarted. You could think of it like a feudal type government that's crude and harsh on its people. So, of course, all the folks that were trying to attack the princess are like freedom fighters, if you will. They're going to be basically executed. So, this scene starts off where Lieutenant Terrain, she gets to be the one to put the ropes around their necks, and she's not really feeling it. So, I'll start right in that part. General Kantik gave Terrain an encouraging nod. The first of the condemned was a dark man with salt crusted black hair that curled around his ears and a thick, close beard covering his chin. She hadn't seen him this morning, and he refused to make Terrain's job easier. She stood on tiptoes to loop the noose over his neck. The second person was a young woman, less bullish, delicate even. The fight in her was gone. She watched Terrain calmly and ducked into the noose, murmuring under her breath. The woman was praying. Terrain had studiously ignored Sergeant Thibault's praying in the barracks long enough to recognize the rhythms. Nearby, Cantic cleared her throat. Terrain shuddered and cinched the rope quickly, reciting to herself from the Tellerhurst lessons, "There are no gods, only superstitions. No superstition can harm you." And yet, when their skin touched, Terrain felt a tingling sensation across her body. She got through the others as quickly as she could, trying to forget the feeling. Instead, she felt only the pressure of everyone's eyes on her and the tickle of her own sweat down her coat. The older man was the last one. He tried gamely to stand up straight. His shaggy gray hair hung in his face. It seemed like he'd aged decades since she'd met him at the docks. Smiling warmly with his camel. It wasn't real, she told herself. He'd been a distraction, a pair of eyes. He pulled the noose around his sagging neck. As she tightened the rope, his eyes narrowed at her and then popped wide. "You look just like," the man rasped, working around his dry tongue. Louder, he rushed to get the words out. "You're Jagody's daughter, aren't you?" Doreen startled and looked at Pruitt, who held the drop lever. "Do it now," Doreen said with her eyes. "You're Hainan," the old man's voice croaked from his throat. Doreen staggered back at the sound of her old name. Her heart dropped into her gut like the gallows floor, and the air caught in her lungs. The old man dangled, except for a few desperate kicks. The prisoners hanged in silence. Terrain saluted Kantic and jogged down to stand in front of her soldiers as if nothing happened, as if her heart wasn't rattled in its cage. I think that's good. Right enough to cover the part I wanted to mention.
Hmm. Wow. That's that's a nice piece of writing. I gotta admit. It's a really nice way of show don't tell, right? As you read it out loud, I was thinking a couple of things like how would I write this scene, right? This woman who's, as you said, not feeling it, right? As she's about to go through and put a noose on these people. And I like how instead of even talking about how she feels at first, the author writes out this description of the people so that you can tell that the character is recognizing the humanity in them, even as
Yeah.
she goes on her task. Even before they even talk about how she feels about it, you know that she's just kind of noticing that they're people that she's about to be complicit in killing. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. She being a conscript, he's basically the executioner, paying part of the executioner for the people that she was conscripted from. Then you learn later, she was taken away from them at a young age. And here she is. And so the story continues on where she's just having a hard time dealing with that. So that was our episode. A few excerpts. And I hope everybody loved them out there. And if you have ideas for stories, shoot them our way. I'd love to get a reading list going from our listeners. That'd be cool. What do you think?
I'd look forward to it. I could finally put in my daily reading allocation
Yes.
with intention.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And until next time, take care and keep reading. Bye.